Will I need to do anything with the chat or the Q&A?
No. We will facilitate that. So if anything comes in, we will say, hey, Ashley, we have a question during the Q&A. Don't mind if somebody's hand gets raised or a question comes in during, well, I don't know. Maybe people who should ask during should just ask the question. I don't know. What do you think?
That's fine. I don't care either way. I just want to make sure I'm not ignoring anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I would think for flow, and if we do end up having, 40 people on here, it'll probably be easier for them to, any questions during, to throw it into the Q&A. And then when we get into the post presentation, we can address this Q&A questions. Then also if people have their hands raised, we can just buzz them in.
Okay.
That's probably going to be the most organized way to do it, rather than you having to stop and restart while you're presenting.
Okay.
All right. Shall we start the webinar?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and broadcast. I think I can talk today, doing a webinar. Good morning, afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to our coffee break. We're just going to take a couple more minutes to let everybody come in, and then we will go ahead and get started with introduction and a small icebreaker as well.
All right, thanks for joining us. We'll be getting started here in a couple of minutes. Allow some time for others to join in. Rachel, we didn't get our intro music this time.
I was actually just scrolling for it, and I thought now I'll have to be better prepared for our next coffee break series and get the nice elevator music going. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you. As people start coming in, we're just going to take a couple of minutes to make sure everybody can get into the Zoom room, and then we will go ahead and get started.
Okay, well, I think let's go ahead and get started while people are still trickling in. Thank you all for joining us this morning, this afternoon, wherever you're at in the US, for our first coffee break tech series. This is something that we are super excited about, something that Rachel and I have been kind of brainstorming since WISR came into inception. So thank you for joining us today. I'm Erin Merrill. I'm one of the co-founders of WISR. With me is Rachel Oster, the other co-founder. And we're really excited as part of our labor of love that is the Women in Solid Waste and Recycling to have you join us here today. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about WISR. We are a nonprofit organization. We're centered in Sacramento, California, but we have members from all across the United States and into Canada, and been kind of on a nice natural slow growth trajectory over the last 4.5 years that we've been in existence. Really kind of starting as a networking group that also has a training and development side to really develop leaders within this industry, whether it's leaders within your level all the way up to the executive suite, to really empower women as well as supportive men here within the industry to give them the skills and the backing they need to be leaders within the waste industry space. I think we have some familiar names in the participant list who are members. We also have some non-members who are joining us today. We are, again, a national organization. However, we also feature regional chapters in which we are in the process of building. We have 2 chapters already in existence, Southern California and Northern California, and we're in the process of developing chapters on the East Coast as well as in the Southwest. So we're really excited about our growth with that. But in the meantime, while we're building these regional chapters, we're really focused on bringing content nationwide and typically through these virtual, especially in the COVID world, these virtual outlets. So thank you for joining us on Zoom. I know we're all a little Zoom fatigued now, 1.5 years into this pandemic, but hopefully we can give you a nice little break here today. If you're interested in about WISR membership, definitely check out our website at www.wiserwomen.org, as well as social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. So we really do encourage you to check us out. This series is, again, a kickoff of a new series for us, kind of focusing a little bit more on the technical side of things within the industry. We kind of casually referred this as subjects that you might not have known about that, you might have questions about. So feel free to utilize the knowledge that we have, and I'll introduce Ashley here in just a second, and ask, feel free to ask those questions. This is the first of a 3-part series for this fall, and then we hope to also replicate this going into next year. But we have, Ashley Porter with us today from TEC Equipment to talk trucks. Next month, we'll have AMP Robotics to talk about robotic sorting at MRFs. And then we'll be rounding out this 2021 series with Waste Experts, who is a waste valet service, helping in sorting and meeting diversion goals. So we're really excited about our lineup this year. for upcoming events for WISR, as we get into the fall, our Southern California chapter is having a virtual networking event on September 22nd. This is open to members and non-members. Really encourage you to participate, and you don't have to be from Southern California to join. Anyone can attend. So definitely check out, again, wiserwomen.org or our social media for more information on that. In addition, us here at the national office, we're in the process of planning our fall webinar professional development series. So stay tuned for that. We should have more information on that series probably in early October. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel for a quick little icebreaker, so to say, and we'll come back right after.
All right. Well, you heard Erin say that we started out just focused on networking, and we made a commitment that everything that we do will have some level of networking involved, because it's very important in a relationship-driven industry to build those relationships with like-minded fellow leaders in the industry. So the way that we're going to do that today is through the chat function. Yeah, I know it's a little bit boring, but it's something, right? So how we're going to do this is, have you ever participated in one of those icebreakers where there was a circle and somebody asked a question and you have to step into the circle if it's true for you? Well, we're going to do a little bit version of that, but in the chat function, we're just going to find out where people are from and what our audience looks like today. So so in the chat function, you can either raise your hand or say me, or whatever you choose, however you choose to communicate. We would like you to raise your hand or to put in the chat if you are on the East Coast.
Okay, got a couple East Coasters on there.
Okay.
Carrie raising her hand in the list. We got Anne. Awesome.
Okay. Okay. How about in the Midwest? Have any Midwesterners on the call today?
No.
All right. No Midwest. How about any of the Southern states? Do we have Texas? Do we have Louisiana? Do we have New Mexico? Any Southern states?
Okay, we got Lauren.
Hi, Lauren from
Lauren.
Austin. I just saw that US composting is going to be in Austin in 2022. That's awesome. Okay, West Coast. Where are our California peeps? West Coast, raise your hand. And it's not just California, it just makes up, it's just a large part of the West Coast.
Yep.
All right, and any Northerners? We got anybody from the Dakotas or anything like that? All right, okay. So now that we know where everybody is from and the big range of people we have on the call today, let's find out what part of the industry we're all from. So if you are in private industry, raise your hand. Erin, you're gonna have to help me on reporting of the results because I can't see it all.
Take mental notes.
Okay. How about in government? How many government employees do we have? Consulting? Raise my hand here. And nonprofit. Okay, I raise my hand for that one too. Any nonprofits? All right, well, great. One thing about WISR is that we are inclusive of everybody and all facets of the industry. That's also one of the pillars of our organization, is that we believe that what it will take to diversify the leadership and evolve the industry forward is a meeting of the minds of all facets of the industry, all types of people, thinkers, diversity, really. So thank you all for joining in that little networking icebreaker. And now we'll move on to why we're all here. We want to learn about trucks in a safe place where we can ask the questions that we want to ask. I said to Ashley before that I've been envisioning like a trucks 101 in my head for years since I was in operations, overseeing operations, and happy to be doing it today. I will hand it over to Erin to introduce Ashley, and then we will go from here.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so we're so excited to have Ashley here today. Ashley is the new truck sales manager for TEC Equipment based in Oakland, California. She's been in the trucking industry for about 6 years, including trucks for the solid waste industry. We're excited about this not only because she was willing to be our guinea pig for this first session, but also Ashley has been a really vital and active member and part of our leadership committee for the Northern California, the Capital Corridor region for our WISR chapter here in Northern California. So we're really excited to have Ashley with her. In addition to WISR, she's a member of the Resource Recovery Coalition, as well as the California Trucking Association. She has a passion about transportation. She has a passion for the waste industry. And we just, feel that she's a great fit for this. Outside of work, she loves to go boating, home renovation. She spends time with her 4 teenagers, which was keep her very busy, and her 3 awesome dogs. So we're, again, really super excited to have Ashley here. Again, we really want to encourage all you guys attending today, if you have any questions about trucks, whether waste or not, feel free to send them our way. During the presentation that Ashley has, feel free to put questions into the Q&A function, and we'll address those after the presentation or afterwards in the Q&A period. Just feel free to raise your hand, and we'll tag you in. So don't hesitate. So glad you're here. And with that, I will turn it over to Ashley.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Erin. Let me get the presentation up and then we'll get started. 1 second. Hopefully do not mess this up. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see that?
Looks great, Ashley.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be presenting to you today. As Erin had mentioned, I have been in some sort of trucking industry for about 6 years. My family in general has been in transportation their entire life. So I've been around some type of truck, whether it's a long haul truck, a regional haul truck, a waste truck, throughout my childhood and moving on. So it was only fitting that I came to TEC Equipment about 6 years ago to do sales. The goal for today, and whatever, okay, there we go. The goal for today is for me to kind of give you an overview of the trucking world, trucks that you're utilizing for the waste industry. Before we get started, I would really love this to be kind of an open discussion and a transparent discussion. I don't think there's any crazy questions. Trucks are complicated and unique to every vocation that you're working in. So please, if you have any questions throughout this, don't hesitate to ask. I'm happy to answer whatever we can, or even if we finish this presentation today and you want to know more, please let me know. We'd love to do an offline conversation with you. So today, without getting too crazy about trucks, because I could talk about it forever, we're going to look at just the world of trucks, do some over 60,000 view elevation of trucks. We're going to talk about a truck anatomy, what makes it go, why we need them, what they're used for. And then we're going to get into the specifics of waste industry trucks. So what trucks are being utilized in the industry that we're currently in? Why are we using them? How are we using them? What makes them do what they do? And then with everything, there's regulations. So we're going to talk about the various regulations that are involved with trucking and truck specs. And then from there, we'll talk about future of trucks. There'll be some time afterwards for questions. And like I said, I would love for this to be a open conversation. So there's no dumb questions. Feel free to ask whatever you have. And from there, we're going to go. So before we get started, I wanted to kind of give some general definitions that you'll hear throughout this presentation today. There are things that go into what trucks are, how we use them, what your companies are using them for, what the independent companies are using them for, and why we have them. The first thing is truck classification. In the US, there are, commercial truck classification is determined based on the vehicle's gross vehicle weight rating, or as we call GVWR. The classes range from 1 to 8. And then we have what's called a CDL, so commercial driver's license. This is a tested and approved driver to operate certain types of motor vehicles, including 18-wheeler trucks, tour buses, school buses, tanker vehicles, and vehicles transporting hazardous materials. This is a special driver's license that the majority of the drivers that work in the waste industry have. It is the federal government regulating the law for these licenses in the United States. They're specific on what they can and can't do and how they operate these vehicles, because they are complicated, and a lot of times they're hauling hazardous materials and large equipment. And so this commercial driver's license makes sure that your drivers are approved. And it really, I think, shows the skills of what your drivers are, what the drivers of all of these vehicles are doing. And then this is a broad view of gross vehicle weight rating. It represents the maximum amount of a weight that your truck can handle safely, which includes your payload capacity. Payload is important. That's how we get paid. So each truck or each vehicle has a GVWR, and we'll go into that a little bit more, what that represents and why that's important. And then payload. Payload is a product that's carried in your trucks that produces revenue or income. It's usually expressed in weight. So when we're talking waste, when we're talking garbage trucks, we're talking recycling, organics, regular garbage, the construction stuff. That is all payload. That's what you're picking up. That's what gets sorted at your MRFs. That's what is the cities and counties are paying for. What your customers are paying for is for you to pick that up and take care of that. So that would be considered your payload. And then tar weight. This is just the weight of an empty truck, and why the tar weight is important. And again, we're getting really specific here, but it will be important later on when we're talking about payload, when we're talking about gross vehicle weight rating. You need to understand what the basic weight of a truck is. So what I want to talk about now is classifications. So every vehicle has a classification. That classification is determined by the gross vehicle weight rating. And that classification almost also determines whether you need a specialized license to drive that vehicle. So class 1 to 3 is just your day-to-day car or truck. You're not required to have a CDL. If you're 16 and you've passed your driver's test, you can drive this vehicle. So think cars, trucks, convertibles, that falls into the class 1 to 3 range. A lot of fleet cars fall into this range. Then you have class 4. So that has a gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000 pounds to 16,000 pounds. So that's technically how much it can hold. You're, again, not required to drive a CDL with these trucks, but they are a little bit bulkier and do require some knowledge of how the truck operates. Some examples of these trucks are box trucks. A lot of times, like your fleet trucks or your technician trucks fall within this class 4 range. And then you have class 5, which is a gross vehicle weight rating of 16,001 pounds to 19,500. Again, CDL truck is not required. Some examples of this are farm trucks, bucket trucks, and then again, it's certain types of box trucks. So class 1 to 5 are classifications that you see and you deal with, but really the ones that were specific to how waste companies operate and the payload that they're pulling, we're going to really be talking about class 6, class 7, and class 8. So a class 6 truck has a gross vehicle weight rating of 19,501 to 26,000 pounds. CDL is not required. Examples of a class 6 truck are your bin trucks, your small flatbeds, school buses. Those fall within the class 6 range. Class 7 has a gross vehicle weight rating of 26,001 to 33,000 pounds. Again, this doesn't require a CDL, but these trucks start to get a little bit more complicated on how you operate them. So you have street sweepers, you have small refuse trucks, so a small rear loader, a small side loader, those type of things fall for within the class 7 range. And then we're going to talk about class 8. So class 8 is really the big boy trucks. Whoops, I went backwards, sorry, of what we're talking about. And so the class 8 trucks are heavy duty trucks. Those are your ones that are your front loaders, your rear loaders, any concrete trucks that you see, long haul trucks. Class 8 trucks are what are moving all of our stuff across the country. They're what we use to pick up garbage, what we use to pick up dumpsters. They're the water trucks that are going to put water on various construction sites. So these are the ones that are really complicated. They can haul quite a bit of payload. They have a gross vehicle weight rating of 33,001 pounds and up. They do require CDL, and also depending on what you're carrying, there may be some other things that are within that. So there was a quick question, really quick. It says, did the gross vehicle weight rating equal the payload weight plus the tar rate? No, the gross vehicle weight rating equals what the truck is allowed to hold. So we'll go a little bit more into that when we're talking about axles and stuff, but that basically is, if you're looking at like a class 8 truck, it has a gross vehicle weight rating of 33,000 pounds and up, or like to 66,000 pounds. So that would be the weight of the truck plus the weight. You would add the weight of the truck, your driver, your fuel. You would take that weight and then subtract it. Let's say the gross vehicle weight rating was 33,000 pounds. You would subtract it to 33,000 pounds, and that would give you how much payload you could hold. So we'll get a little bit more into that here shortly. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the anatomy of the truck. So, and there's certain things that a truck is made up of that really makes that truck move. In this discussion, we're not going to talk anything about bodies, because as individual trucks or individual bodies for each of these trucks are very individual and their application, and that would be something that we could talk about probably at a different series. But you have anatomy of a truck. You have the heart, the brain, the lungs, the arms, and the legs. I like to look at it that way because each of those things powers the truck and is specific to how it operates. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the engine, which is basically the heart of a truck. The engine is your vehicle's main source of power. It uses fuel and burns to produce mechanical power, and then the chemical energy is converted into mechanical energy. The heat produced by the combustion is used to create pressure, which is then used to drive a mechanical device. So this is like the heart of the truck. It's what gives it power to kind of do everything else that this truck is going to do. The next thing we're going to talk about is the transmission. I like to think of the transmission as the brain of the truck. So a truck's transmission is important because it's one of the most important components of the truck. It moves the power from the engine to the wheels. The transmission, a lot of times the power from the transmission is used to run the hydraulic systems on the body. So this is really kind of the brain of the truck. It takes the blood and moves it into the different parts of the truck to make that truck move. And then you have the lungs, which is like I would want to refer to as the exhaust system. So exhaust system is important. This is something that's highly regulated. What comes out of that exhaust system, what the purpose of the exhaust system is to safely route gases from the engine so it can go into the environment. When I say this is highly regulated, it's because of how the engine uses that fuel and how it comes out of the exhaust system. Our goal is to make sure that whatever comes out, air that comes out from stuff produced from the engines is coming out clean. So that's when we're talking about, carb regulation. A lot of these trucks have SCR systems, which really burn that gas down to make it a really pure form of air that comes out. I would say the majority of your diesel CNG trucks today, the air that goes into the trucks and the air that comes out of it, the air that comes out of it is probably cleaner than the air that goes into it. And then we're going to talk about the arms and legs. So this would be your axles. So when we're talking about gross vehicle weight rating, axles play a lot into that because your axles are giving weight ratings, and that's kind of what bears the weight of your vehicle. It bears the weight of the body. It bears the weight of the payload. It's a rod and a shaft that rotates the wheels and supports the weight of the vehicle. So you can see here in this diagram, you have a front axle, and then some trucks have only one rear axle, some trucks have two rear axles, some trucks have alternative axles that are either in the front and the back. But each of these axles are given a weight rating. So let's say this front axle was 10,000 pounds, and then the combination of your rear axles were each 20, which would mean 40,000 pounds. Your gross vehicle weight rating of this truck would be 50,000 pounds or 60,000 pounds. So the axles are really what's carrying the weight for these trucks. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next page. So what I want to do now is really get into the specifics of waste industry trucks. The waste industry is unique because it has so many different applications for trucks, and they mostly fall in the class 6 and 7 and class 8 ranges. So we're going to go specific and talk about class 6 trucks and class 7 trucks. So the first thing, these trucks are 19,501 to 33,000 gross vehicle weight rating. One of the first trucks that we use or see in the waste industry, in this industry and this classification, is mini rear loaders. So mini rear loaders are used in really compact areas. They're used for hard to service areas. They're used up in hills. Like here in California, a lot of these are used in San Francisco because they're small, they're compact, they're only picking up one commodity. They're sometimes only able to carry one, and they're easy to get in and out of places. You can see in this rear loader, this type of truck is called a cab over because it sits on top of the engine. It typically only carries about 8 to 10 yards. The payload on it is probably not high, but it's used for those areas you can't get a big truck into because of where it's located, maybe the hills, maybe what type of, maybe it's a complex that has a whole bunch of vehicles in there. So this truck is really used to get into small, tight places. And the engine on these are usually like a 9-liter or smaller. And then you have mini side loaders. So a mini side loader is typically used for residential. Again, for tight places, hard to get into places. Kind of your difference between your rear loader and your side loader is your rear loader, a driver's having to get out and dump those bins into the back of the truck. A side loader has arms that will reach out and grab your bins. Again, mini side loaders are for very small areas. Areas where the driver's not having to get in and out of the truck. You can see this is what's called a conventional cab. So it has the nose on it. It typically holds 10 to 14 yards and has, again, an engine that's 9 liters or smaller. And then we have stake trucks, bin trucks. These are used to deliver bins to residential areas. A lot of companies use these trucks to pick up oversized cardboard. When you have those days where they're like, leave everything out on the side, and you have things where they're picking up, maybe sofas or chairs or odd shaped items, your stake truck or bin truck would be utilized for that. Again, it has 9 liters and smaller. The payload on it is very little. You don't need a CDL to drive these trucks. So pretty much anybody could drive these trucks. Then the next one would be like a street sweeper. This is used to sweep parking lots. If anything spills and you need to go out and clean that up in an area, street sweeper would be utilized to go out and take care of it. It doesn't really have payload. The function of that is not for payload. The function of a street sweeper is to clean up after anything. A lot of times these are also 9 liter and smaller, and while it's small and compact and you don't need a special driver's license to drive them, the drivers of these trucks are operating machinery that's complicated and has a lot of moving parts to it. And so, really the driver is the one that's making sure that they understand how everything works, because it sweeps and then it sucks stuff up. And so those are kind of some examples of class 6 and 7 trucks in the waste industry. Now we're going to go to class 8. And I would say these are the trucks that get me super excited. And so these are the trucks that I would say is the heart of the waste industry. These are the trucks that do a lot of the work. They're the heavy haulers. They're complicated. They have complicated bodies. And to me, I just think they're really exciting because of how diverse they are. Let's see. second. So the first one, again, we talked about rear loader. The difference between this rear loader and the one we just spoke about is how much this rear loader can hold the gross vehicle weight rate. You can see that this truck is a lot bigger. It's typically used for residential or commercial. A lot of times it's used for yard waste. It's a single commodity, so this truck doesn't have a split body. You can't put multiple commodities in it. And then it's typically dual drive. So when we're talking about dual drive, and I think this is the part that makes the drivers of these trucks artists almost in their thing, is this truck can drive from both the right side and the left side. A lot of times these trucks have two people in them, one to drive it, one to get out and pick up the bends and put them on the timbers and dump them into the truck. Typically the engine on this truck is an 11 liter or plus. And then the transmissions, we had talked a little bit about transmissions, and there's three types of transmissions. There's a fully automatic transmission, an automated manual transmission, and then a manual transmission. The majority of your garbage trucks will be fully automatic transmissions. That means there's no clutch in these trucks. A lot of it is software driven, how they're utilized. And so in this type of truck, you're going to operate an Allison transmission, which is fully automatic. And then you have a side loader, which is also sometimes called an atomizer because of how the arm operates on this truck. So these are typically used for residential. A lot of times in California, these are dual commodity trucks. So if you're looking at this body on here, it looks like it's just one. A lot of times they're split in half. So this truck can do multiple things and pick up multiple types of commodities. So a lot of times this truck will go on a route and it will pick up garbage, and then we'll also pick up the recycling, and they're held in separate bins on the body. Again, this truck has multiple ways it can be driven. A lot of times they're right-hand drive only because the operator needs to be able to see the arm that's coming out. And so it will drive right-hand all the way on the freeway during the routes everywhere. Sometimes they're dual drive. So trucks that are maybe operating in areas where their trucks are having to get onto the freeway, they'll build those to be dual drive. So they'll drive on the freeway on the left-hand side, and then they'll operate on the right-hand side. Again, this has a higher engine, 11 liter engine. It needs a little bit more power to run all the hydraulics that operate with it. A side loader, I think, is a very cool thing. If you ever get the opportunity to go do a ride along with the driver, I highly recommend it. A side loader can do on any given day, probably 1,500 to 2,000 residential bins. That's a lot. They're doing that in like 8 hours. So again, to stress, the drivers of these are artists in what they do and very skilled at what they do. So the trucks kind of give them the ability to do it, but it's really the drivers that are operating them and using them to their best ability. And then you have front loaders. So front loaders are commercial multifamily units, single commodity. They're typically left-hand drive. The has arms, you can see in this, that goes down, it picks up the large bins and then dumps it. A lot of times they're dumpsters. So most fleets have, side loaders, front loaders, and maybe one or two rear loader routes, depending on where you're located. And then you have roll-offs. So roll-offs are, again, conventional. They can be conventional or cab over, but they are used to pick up dumpsters. They're used for commercial and construction. You typically won't see a roll-off in residential, and they're typically left-hand drive. I think there was a question about what is it called again when the cab is on top of the engine. So these trucks are called cab overs. So if you look at the rear loader, the side loader, and the front loader, the way that those cabs are, the cab sits on top of the engine. And the reason why that's important is because you see these trucks out on the street and they're having to get in really tight places. The cab over the engine gives it a really tight turning radius. So they're able to get in and maneuver in cul-de-sacs, up and down hills, in tight parking lots. It gives more room also on the back of the truck for the body. So your weight is not, in the cab, but in the body and the payload. Next. So now we're going to go into commercial truck regulation. Transportation and trucking in general is regulated quite a bit. The stuff that I'm going to talk about today is really going to be general regulation stuff. It's going to talk about how they're built and also how and when they're operated. So the first thing we're going to talk about is carb compliance. As we were talking about the exhaust, it was one of the things I had mentioned is that the goal is to have the air that's coming out of your exhaust be cleaner than the air going in. As these trucks have changed and as technology has changed, the ability for them to produce cleaner air has gotten better year over year. So there is this is specific to California carb compliance, where the California Carb Air Resources Board has come out and said, okay, we're trying to have the cleanest air possible. And so we're going to start changing the regulation on what kind of trucks you can operate and what model year engines you can operate. So 2021, they've come out and said medium heavy duty trucks, any trucks that are 2006 or older, you need to replace those with 2010 or newer model year engines. Once we get to 2023, that threshold goes up a little bit, and you can no longer, it's not 2006 or older, it's 2009 or older. And then this is important, especially when you're looking at fleets of trucks. Some of these trucks can go 10, 15 years, a million miles, but because of the carb compliance, they're having to replace their trucks to have newer technology on their engines to help keep up with cleaner air regulations. And then another thing that's important is starting January 1st, 2022, in California, all 2022 model year engines must be California carb certified from the factory. So what they're wanting is to make sure that these engines and after treatment systems are maintained. If they break, they're taking care of them. And so this regulation is saying that from the manufacturers that we're giving them warranty to make sure that the cost of fixing these units are taken care of, excuse me, for at least 5 years, and people won't be driving around with trucks that have, broken exhaust systems and producing bad air. The next thing that is important, and we've talked a little bit about payload, a little bit about gross vehicle weight rating, and these trucks are heavy trucks, and so there's a federal bridge law that is enacted by the US Congress. Basically, the federal bridge law limits the weight to length ratio of heavy trucks. It's used to protect the roads and bridges from damage caused by the trucks and the concentrated weight of these shorter trucks. We had talked about axle ratings, and basically what the federal bridge law says is in order to carry more payload or have a heavier truck, you have to have the axles to support that weight. If you've ever driven on 880, like over here in Oakland, you can see that there's huge potholes, and there's typically certain lanes that are really more used than others. And that's because trucks are driving in those lanes, and the weight of those trucks really do a toll on the road. So federally, the more axles you add that can take the brunt of that weight, the better it is. And without getting too complicated, the bridge laws are there to make sure that our roads are kept up and we're not putting too much stress on them by just overloading these trucks. If you're on the East Coast, you see trucks that have, 8 axles or 6 axles, and that's because they're carrying probably heavier items, and those axles are helping to support that weight. And then California has its own specific bridge laws. So California has a ton of bridges, a ton of roads. And so what California has said is we're going to make the federal bridge law even more specific to what you can do here in California. So in California, you can only have a total of 4 axles, and it limits what you can do from a payload or weight rating on these trucks. So they're, instead of saying you can add as many axles as you want, California is essentially saying you can only add a total of 4 axles. And after that 4th axle is added, that's the limit of weight that you can do. There's a whole complicated equation to figure those out. We can, if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to talk to you about it offhand. But in general, that's just kind of your general regulations of federal bridge law and California bridge law. It's used to help protect our infrastructure and our roads and our bridges. So now we're going to talk about future regulations. It's something that's coming quick and fast. Electric trucks are coming. I would say probably California and New York are the most advanced when it comes to these kinds of regulations. The advanced clean truck regulation is one that's really pushing the manufacturers as well as independent companies to go electric. With an electric truck, you no longer have an engine, you have a motor, and therefore you have no exhaust because it's a motor and it's electrically driven. There's no fossil fuels used for that. It's driven by electric power. So the advanced clean truck regulation that's come out is a regulation to accelerate large scale transition of zero emission medium and heavy duty vehicles. It's going to affect class 2B to class 8, and it has two components to it, including a manufacturer sales requirement and a reporting requirement. The zero emission truck sales manufacturers who certify class 2B to 8 chassis or complete vehicles with combustion engines, which would be your diesel engines, your CNG engines, would be required to sell zero emission trucks as an increasing percentage of their annual California sales from 2024 to 2035. So what California is saying is if you're a manufacturer who produces 2B to 8 chassis, they're wanting to see you sell a certain percentage of your engines need to be, or trucks need to have zero emission motors in them. They're saying by 2035, which is really, 14 years away, it's not that far. Zero emission truck chassis sales will need to be 55% of their class 2B to 3 truck sales. So here they're saying out of all the trucks that you manufacture for each manufacturer, if they're manufacturing, I'm going to say a small number, 100 trucks, 50 of those trucks need to have zero emissions or need to, whether that's electric or hydrogen, it needs to be zero emissions of the 75% of their class 4 to 8 straight trucks and 40% of their truck tractor sales. So tractors are the ones that have trailers on them or a fifth wheel on them versus a straight truck, which has a body on it. So the company part of this reporting is company and fleet reporting. Large employers, including retailers, manufacturers, brokers, and others are required to report information about shipments and shuttle services. Fleet owners with 50 or more trucks are required to report about their existing fleet operations. So basically what they're looking for here is if the manufacturers are producing these zero emission trucks, they're wanting the fleet owners to be purchasing them and using them. And again, the goal is to have cleaner air out versus bad air that's coming from some of these engines and to just give us overall better environment. So this information will help identify future strategies to ensure that fleet purchases have zero emissions availability and that they're actually using the trucks and placing them in service where the needs meet. I would say this future regulation is really going to push our fleets to go electric and possibly at some point hydrogen. It's very, very new. And I think a lot of companies and the technology is really working to get to the point where it can work all the way around. So I have completed my overall information. I know it's a lot of information. I would love to open it up for questions or comments. Like I said, it's a really quick, fast and dirty overview of trucks and trucking for the waste industry.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. I know on your next slide, you have some resources as well. And
yeah, I do have some resources.
Flip to that while we still have the screen.
Yeah, we can do that.
I see a few questions coming in, but before we jump in again, we just scratched the surface of a huge, huge topic. And I know, I was just loving the presentation that Ashley just did. So do feel free to ask your questions. Do feel free to follow up even with Ashley directly, or you can funnel it through Rachel and myself at info@wiserwomen.org. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to help facilitate some of the Q&A. Again, if you have some questions, feel free to raise your hand, enter it in the chat or the Q&A function. And yeah, thanks.
Ashley, so we do have a couple of questions coming in, mostly around where these rules are applicable. So the rules we're sharing, are they strictly California? Are they federal? Yeah, that's.
So the CARB compliance stuff is each engine manufacturer has to get certified and be at a certain EPA level. The specific CARB compliance that we talked about today, that is specific to California. I don't necessarily know New York's CARB compliance regulations, but typically California and New York are the ones that are the most strict when it comes to CARB compliance. And then bridge law stuff. So I had broken it down to federal bridge law and then California bridge law. So the federal bridge law is applicable across the nation. California bridge law is applicable to California, and it's more strict than the federal bridge law, so it trumps that federal bridge law.
I see. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, and if anybody else has questions, into the chat or into the Q&A, either works. But while we're waiting, Ashley, do you find hauling companies sort of voluntarily moving toward electrification? Or is this something that mandates are generally, you know, pushing them to do? And, you know, kind of what are some of the challenges and opportunities associated with it? I mean, why would you choose to voluntarily do it? You know,
So
what are the opportunities there?
Pros and cons. I mean, I would say I don't think at this point anyone's volunteering to do it. The technology is really, really new. And so I think it's being pushed federally, or not federally, but locally, like from our local government. I think there's a point for it at some point. People that are doing it or companies that are doing it are doing it because they have grants to help pay for it. And, you know, I think at some point it is the future. Challenges, I mean, they're expensive. These trucks are expensive. The technology is really new, so there's not a lot of options for them. It's very specific. You don't have as many, the ability to change up the bodies or anything like that. It's very kind of one-sided a little bit. I think the other challenges are the infrastructure of getting what you need to charge these trucks. And also it's not, because of the way the technology is right now, you can't take an electric truck and replace it a full route with an electric truck to replace a diesel route. So kind of the ratio at this point is you have one diesel truck that runs a route of maybe 1,500 trucks. You probably need 2.5, maybe 3 trucks to replace that one diesel route. So you figure the cost of it is pretty expensive. And then you add in having to have drivers and the cost of the trucks and the infrastructure. It makes it challenging, but they are being pushed a little bit to do it. I think the benefits are, you know, it is cleaner air. And I think that's kind of the way of where we're going. I think in theory, the maintenance of an electric truck is a lot less because you have less moving components than a diesel or CNG truck.
Oh, those are really, you know, a thoughtful answer, because it's the challenges are so hard because it is so new, and you know, just so many other competing things happening in the industry at the same time. So
100%.
we do have a question coming from Lauren here in the Q&A. Do you find that more companies are buying used or new trucks more?
So I would say in the waste industry, they're buying new. And they're buying new because of what their contracts are requiring them. And also, I mean, the longevity of a waste truck is a lot. I think also what you're hauling and the specifics, I mean, we didn't really talk body specifics, but body is very specific to your route and the functions of the commodities that you're picking up. A lot of companies outside of the waste industry, or if they're buying, I would say if it's like a bin truck or something that's a little bit more generic, sometimes that is used. Outside the waste industry in various different vocations, like dirt, for instance, dump trucks, quite a few companies purchase used dump trucks because it's a little bit cheaper, used long haul trucks. I think it just depends on what vocation you're in and what you can afford.
Really interesting. I have another question about maintenance. And, when in my time in operations, one of the hardest roles to fill was mechanics. And, it's difficult to find mechanics that are used to working on collection vehicles, hydraulic arms, some of the more unique features of our industry's vehicles. Do you think that electrification opens up opportunities for different types of skills on the mechanic side, more of an employee pool, and not to make it too complicated, but like, and what can we do to kind of, to help with that as we start making the move toward more electric?
So I think technicians in general, I mean, when I look at kind of how specific and how complicated these trucks are, whether it's diesel or electric, whether it's a waste truck or a concrete truck or a long haul truck. I mean, the technicians have to be very, very skilled. There's a lot of components they need to know. These trucks are very software driven nowadays. So not only are they having to be mechanical and understand how to fix the mechanical side of stuff, they're really dealing with a lot of the software stuff. So it's a lot of skill and work, and it's specific skill. It's a specific skill set that not a lot of people are wanting to go into anymore. I would say, encouraging our kids to do more trade school stuff. I think the electrification is going to make it more complicated, to be honest, because while there's not as much maintenance, what you're dealing with is highly corrosive. It's a little bit harder to work on. And again, a lot of it is software driven. So it's a very specific skill set. And I would say the same thing with drivers too. I mean, I think something in our industry that we hear a lot of that's hard to find is drivers and technicians. And it's because it is a very specific skill set and it takes years to get to know that. I mean, we did a general discussion about engines and transmissions. We didn't go into how many different types of engines there are, how many different manufacturers of engines, transmissions, and each one of those has to be worked on and have a different skill set to work on them.
Yeah, I know this industry certainly has, a lot of jobs that are being, more and more challenging to fill because of those skill sets and, the lack of promotion of trade.
Yeah.
In our education system. So, here at WISR, we're really kind of focused on that. How do we, how do we solve for some of these challenges with hiring? I think whenever you have challenges with hiring, you have to look at leadership. As a leader, you always turn internally and you say, what can we do? What are we doing wrong? So, it's interesting. It seems like this move to electric and other technologies gives us an opportunity to source from job pools that we haven't before, and use those skills that our kids are. I know they'll be more technically savvy than the employees that we have now and in the past, just being like, as you mentioned, it's not strictly mechanical anymore. So
it's very software driven.
Word,
Yeah.
So how do we use language to pull more people into those job roles and use this evolution of the industry to?
I mean, I look at my kids and like right now my son's taking a small engine class, and what he's doing and what he's learning I think is awesome, but his technical skills and his ability to understand the software is way above what I can do. And again, all of these trucks, I mean, we have in these trucks called ECU units or electrically controlled units. Those are all connected together to make that truck run. You have a transmission that has, 30 different settings to make that truck work specifically to how you need it to work. It's all software driven. So, somebody that's very good at computer skills or wants to do something like that, I think would fit well in a technician spot, especially if they like the mechanical side of it.
That's really interesting. I think we're coming up on the hour here, but we do have time for another question, and another one did come in. Is there a difference in truck needed for food waste only, organics route rather than MSW, or?
Yeah, I would say yes. It's more body driven than I think chassis driven, because of your body and not wanting it to cross over from organics versus, recycling. You want to make sure that it's not getting the two mixed. So that's really body driven. I would think it would be depending on what your route is and what you're pulling in. Some of those are commercial. Organics is a lot of restaurants and stuff like that, and that would be kind of a front loader versus a side loader. May even be a rear loader. It just depends on what you're doing. I know that they don't want anything to be contaminated, and so I would say I'm not very good at the operation side of it, but I would say that companies that are doing organics and other types of commodities probably have specific trucks just for the organics that they're picking up.
Yeah, they can get kind of smelly.
Yeah.
And then also leaking is a major concern with food waste as well. Making sure it's all contained. Well, I think that brings us to our end here. I know, Erin, you had a couple just reminders of our upcoming events, and just want to thank Ashley so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Audience, making a dream come true today, having a Trucks 101. So, there's so much more to dive into. So we'll love to hear from our members and our audience if they want to hear more about trucks. I know I do. I certainly learned a lot today. And so thank you, Ashley, so much. And
thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I appreciate the opportunity. Anytime I get to talk about trucks, I am here for that. So
I get it.
Feel free to reach out.
All right. Great. Thanks, Ashley. So just really quick in our last couple of minutes, and appreciate you all hanging in there with us. Again, as a reminder, there's an open member and non-member Southern California and non-Southern California virtual networking event that our SoCal region is putting on September 22nd. Check out Eventbrite or wiserwomen.org or our social media for more information, or you can email us. Stay tuned for our fall professional development series. We should be announcing that here very soon. Again, to learn more about membership offerings, check us out at our website, on social media, or contact us at info@wiserwomen.org. And then we'll be back for part 2 of our fall 2021 tech series, Coffee Break Tech Series, on October 13th. We'll be back at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern. And that one will be with AMP Robotics, talking about robotic sorting at MRFs. Very cool stuff. So in the meantime, again, thanks so much for joining us, and contact us with any questions, and we'll see you in October. Thanks so much.
Bye.